I've always believed the scariest moments in life don't come from haunted houses or horror movies. They come from the places where we're supposed to feel safe. A quiet job, a cozy house, a familiar face. But safety is an illusion, and sometimes you don't realize it until you're already in too deep. I had just started a part-time job as a caretaker for an older man who suffered from dementia. His family couldn't stay overnight, so they paid me to handle the graveyard shift. Honestly, I thought it would be easy money. Just sit around, keep an eye on him, maybe help him if he woke up confused. The first night wasn't too bad. He wandered a bit, mumbled things under his breath, but nothing I couldn't handle. By the second night, though, I noticed something strange. Around 2 in the morning, he started pacing in the hallway. At first, it was just shuffling footsteps. Then he began whispering, low, broken words I couldn't make out. By the third night, things escalated. I was sitting on the couch scrolling through my phone when I heard a loud bang in the kitchen. I rushed over and found the old man standing in the middle of the room, staring at the wall. His eyes looked empty, like he wasn't really there. I tried guiding him back to bed, but he resisted, muttering something about the shadows and the door. I chalked it up to his condition until the fourth night. I was half asleep in the recliner when I heard a sound that froze my blood. The closet door in the hallway creaked open. Slowly, I thought maybe he was in there, rummaging around like before. But when I walked over and pulled the door open, what I saw made me step back. He was crouched inside, clutching something in his hand. It was a kitchen knife. He looked up at me, his face pale, his mouth twisted in a half smile. That didn't look like him at all. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then, as calmly as if nothing was wrong, he said, I was just keeping this safe. I didn't argue. I didn't try to grab it. I just backed away and pretended like everything was fine, my heart pounding so hard I thought I'd pass out. The rest of the night, I locked myself in the guest room and didn't sleep a single second. The next morning, I told his family what happened. They laughed it off, said I must have misunderstood. But here's the thing. When I left that house, I checked the kitchen. Every knife was neatly in place, except the one he'd been holding. I quit the job immediately. And to this day, I still wonder, was it really just his illness? Or did he know exactly what he was doing? Because sometimes, dementia isn't the scariest part of the job. But danger doesn't always come from the people you're hired to watch. Sometimes it comes from the person sleeping just down the hall. After that job, I promised myself I'd be more careful about where I spent my nights. But you don't always get to choose who you share space with. And sometimes the danger is already living under the same roof. I was in college, desperate to find a place to live. Rent was insane and dorms were packed. So when I found a listing for a cheap room in a quiet neighborhood, I jumped on it. The landlord introduced me to my new roommate, a guy named Rob. He seemed normal, quiet, polite, maybe a little awkward. Honestly, I thought I got lucky. But luck doesn't last. The first week was fine. We kept to ourselves, exchanged polite nods, nothing unusual. Then one night, I noticed some of my things were missing. At first it was small, just a t-shirt, a pair of socks. I thought maybe I misplaced them in the laundry. But then my underwear started disappearing. I brushed it off, telling myself it was probably my fault. But deep down I knew something wasn't right. A few nights later, I woke up to a strange noise outside my bedroom. It was faint at first, like a soft tapping. Then it grew louder. Someone was jiggling my doorknob. My heart stopped. I froze in bed, listening as the knob turned back and forth. Over and over. I wanted to scream, but I was paralyzed. After a few minutes, the noise stopped. I convinced myself it was just the old door creaking in the night. The next morning, Rob casually mentioned that my door didn't seem to lock properly. The way he said it made my skin crawl, like he knew exactly what had happened. Things spiraled from there. One evening, I confronted him after discovering a drawer in my room had been rifled through. I demanded to know if he'd been inside. He laughed, not nervously, not apologetically, just laughed like I had told him a joke. That night, I pushed my desk against the door before going to sleep. But the scariest moment came a few weeks later. I was sitting in class when a friend pulled me aside, her face pale. She whispered that she'd looked up Rob's name online. He had a record, a violent one, and not the kind you can explain away. When I got home, I locked myself in my room and called my parents. I was shaking, barely able to get the words out. They begged me to pack up and leave that night. But before I could, Rob knocked on my door. "Why are you telling people lies about me?" he asked, his voice calm, almost too calm. I didn't answer. I just sat there in silence, my back pressed against the door. Hours passed. Sometime in the night, I woke up to a horrifying realization. There was someone in my bed. I shot upright, and in the dim glow from the streetlight outside, I saw him. Rob was lying next to me, perfectly still, staring at the ceiling. I don't even remember screaming. I just remember stumbling out of the room, grabbing my phone, and calling the police. When the cops arrived, he acted confused, like he had no idea why I was upset. They didn't arrest him, but they stayed long enough for me to pack my things and leave for good. I never found out what would have happened if I hadn't woken up that night. But sometimes, the people you share your home with aren't strangers at all. They're predators waiting for the right moment. And if you think that's terrifying, imagine strangers smiling at you through the glass, asking, "Come inside." There's a certain kind of fear that doesn't come from shadows or creaking floors. It comes from a knock at your front door when you least expect it. I was home alone one evening, just winding down after a long day. It was late, around 11, and the neighborhood was quiet. I wasn't expecting visitors, so when the doorbell rang, it immediately put me on edge. I peeked through the peephole, and there she was, a woman, mid-30s maybe, wearing a faded hoodie, her hair messy like she'd been walking for hours. She smiled, but there was something off about it. Too wide, too forced. "Can I come in?" she asked, her voice muffled through the door. I didn't move, didn't answer. Instinct screamed at me to stay quiet, but she knocked again, harder this time. "I just need to use your phone," she said. "Please, just for a minute." Something about the way she said it sent a chill down my spine. Not desperate, not nervous, just flat, like she was reading from a script. I shook my head, even though she couldn't see me, and whispered to the door, "I'm sorry, I can't help you." Silence. For a moment, I thought she'd left. But when I leaned closer to the peephole, she was still there. Only now, she wasn't smiling. Her face had gone blank. Her eyes locked on the door, like she could see straight through it. That's when I noticed something else. She wasn't alone. Just at the edge of the porch light, barely visible, was the outline of a man, standing completely still, watching. My chest tightened, and I backed away from the door. My phone was already in my hand, and I dialed 911 with shaking fingers. The operator told me to stay inside and keep the doors locked. While I waited for the police, the knocking continued. Louder, faster. She kept repeating the same line over and over. "Just let me in. Just let me in." Then, suddenly it stopped. I crept back to the people. They were gone. But the weirdest part wasn't that they left. It was where they left to. The street was empty, the sidewalk clear. No footsteps, no shadows, just the silence, like they had vanished into thin air. By the time the police arrived, the neighborhood looked completely normal. They searched around, shined flashlights into the trees, but found nothing. One of the officers shrugged and said maybe it was just some strangers messing around. But I know what I saw. That smile, that blank stare, and the figure in the shadows, waiting. To this day, every time the doorbell rings unexpectedly, I feel my stomach drop. Because sometimes the danger doesn't break in. It just waits for you to open the door. And sometimes the people outside don't want to get in. They want to make sure you come out. I thought I knew fear, but nothing compares to the kind that hits you when you think someone's about to take your child. It was a regular weekday afternoon, and I was on my way to pick up my little brother from school. My mom had asked me to grab him since she was running late from work. It was supposed to be simple. Pull up, wait by the gates, bring him home. The schoolyard was buzzing with kids and parents. The usual chaos of dismissal. I spotted him right away, his backpack bouncing as he ran toward me. But before I could wave, I noticed something that made my stomach drop. A man I'd never seen before was standing a few feet away from the gate, leaning casually against a tree. He wasn't watching the crowd. He was watching my brother. At first, I tried to rationalize it. Maybe he was just another parent, waiting for his own kid. But the longer I stared, the clearer it became. His eyes never left my brother. I started walking faster, weaving through the crowd. But before I could reach him, the man stepped forward. He bent down, smiling, and said something I couldn't hear. My brother stopped in his tracks. Panic surged through me. "Hey!" I shouted, pushing past a group of kids. "What are you doing?" The man looked up, startled, like he hadn't expected anyone to notice. Then, without saying a word, he turned and started walking away, fast. My brother ran into my arms, confused, asking who that man was. I didn't have an answer. All I could do was hold on to him and scan the crowd, making sure the stranger was really gone. But the story didn't end there. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about it. Something about the man's face stuck with me. The way he looked at my brother, like he already owned him. I barely slept. The next day, I mentioned it to the school staff. They seemed concerned but not surprised. That's when one of the teachers pulled me aside and lowered her voice. "You're not the first person to notice him," she said. "We've had reports of a man hanging around the gates for weeks now. But every time we try to confront him, he disappears." Her words made my blood run cold. This wasn't random. He had been watching, waiting. I don't know what his plan was, or how many times he'd tried before. All I know is that if I'd been a minute later that day, if my brother had taken just a few more steps toward him, I might not be telling this story. And as terrifying as it is to almost lose someone, there's something even worse. Realizing the danger doesn't always vanish when you catch it. Sometimes, it just moves on to the next victim. New Year's Eve is supposed to feel exciting. Fresh start, clean slate, celebration. But that night, what I got was a kind of memory that makes me question if I ever want to step into a crowded party again. A friend had invited me to a small get-together. Nothing wild. Just music, food, a few drinks, and a countdown at midnight. The house was packed with strangers, but I figured that was normal. You bring friends, they bring friends. It all blends together. But almost immediately, I noticed something off. There was a man standing in the corner of the living room, not talking to anyone, not laughing, not drinking, just staring. His eyes scanned the crowd like he was studying us, one face at a time. I tried to ignore it, telling myself he was probably just shy. But then midnight came. Everyone was counting down, cheering, hugging. The noise was deafening. But in that chaos, I felt a hand grip my arm. Not a friendly touch, a tight grip. I turned and it was him, the man from the corner. "Come with me," he whispered. I pulled back, but his fingers dug in harder. The music was so loud, nobody noticed. My heart pounded as he tried to steer me toward the back door. For a split second, I froze, because that's what fear does. It paralyzes you. Then I yanked my arm free and shoved past him, stumbling into the kitchen. I shouted for my friend, my voice cracking. But by the time anyone turned to look, the man was gone. The rest of the night blurred together. I couldn't enjoy a second of it. Every shadow in the room felt like him. Every time the door opened, I was sure he'd walk back in. The next morning, I asked my friend who he was, thinking maybe he had been invited after all. She looked at me, confused. "What man?" she said. We went over the guest list, asked around. Nobody remembered seeing him. Nobody even knew his name. And that's what keeps me awake sometimes. The idea that someone could slip into a party, blend into background, and try to walk out with a stranger like it was nothing. They say New Year's is about new beginnings. But for me, it's a reminder that sometimes endings are closer than you think. I've taken ride shares 100 times, and most of them are forgettable. You get in, you nod, you scroll your phone, and before you know it, you're home. But there was one night that changed how I look at those apps forever. It was late, close to midnight, when I ordered a ride after a party. The driver pulled up in a black sedan, clean, nothing unusual. I got in, said hello, and gave him a polite smile. He didn't respond, just stared straight ahead. That was the first red flag. The second came a few minutes later. I noticed his phone wasn't mounted anywhere. Instead of following the app's directions, he kept glancing at a piece of paper on the passenger seat, a handwritten list of addresses. I leaned forward, my voice uneasy. You got my destination, right?" He nodded, but didn't say a word. The silence was suffocating. As the minutes passed, I realized he wasn't heading toward my neighborhood at all. The streets looked unfamiliar, darker, emptier. My pulse quickened, and I blurted out, "You missed a turn." That's when he finally spoke. "No," he said flatly, his eyes never leaving the road. "We're almost there." Almost where? Panic clawed at my chest. I pulled out my phone, pretending to text someone, but really I was dropping my live location to a friend. The driver must have noticed, because his grip tightened on the wheel, his knuckles turning white. "Phones can be distracting," he muttered. That was the breaking point. I forced a nervous laugh and said, "Actually, I think I left something back at the party. Could you drop me off here?" He didn't answer. The car kept moving. I reached for the door handle, my heart hammering. He glanced at me in the rearview mirror, his expression cold. "You don't want to do that," he said. I didn't think, I just acted. I yanked the door open while the car slowed at a stop sign and stumbled out onto the street. My knees scraped against the asphalt, but I didn't care. I bolted toward the nearest lit gas station, not once looking back. By the time I got the courage to glance outside, the car was gone. No license plate, no trace. When I tried to report it to the rideshare app, they told me no driver with that description had been assigned to my trip. According to their system, I never even got in a car. To this day, I still wonder, whose car was I in that night? I don't usually pick up hitchhikers. It's one of those rules you hear growing up. Don't talk to strangers. Don't let them in your car. But that night, the highway was deserted, and the man on the side of the road looked desperate. He was standing under a flickering streetlight, holding a small duffel bag, his thumb out. It was raining, and his clothes were soaked through. Against my better judgment, I slowed down and pulled over. He opened the door, slid into the passenger seat, and gave me a quick nod. "Thanks. Been out here a long time." His voice was calm, polite even, but something about the way he clutched that bag. It was like he was protecting it or hiding it. As we drove, I tried to make small talk, asked where he was headed. He gave vague answers, never once looking me in the eye. Instead, his gaze flicked constantly to the rear view mirror, like he was making sure nobody was following us. A few miles in, he finally asked me something. His voice dropped low, almost a whisper. "You ever wonder how many people vanish on roads like this?" The question sent a chill down my spine. I laughed nervously, pretending I thought he was joking, but he didn't laugh back. He just smiled, thin, sharp, unsettling. That's when I noticed the duffel bag wasn't zipped all the way, and sticking out from the opening was a knife handle. My throat went dry, my hands tightened on the wheel. I wanted to pull over, but I couldn't just throw him out into the rain without setting him off. So I kept driving, my heart racing, trying to act normal. After a few more miles, he leaned back in the seat and muttered, "This looks like a good spot." Before I could respond, he told me to stop the car. We were in the middle of nowhere, no houses, no gas stations, just trees and darkness. I did what he said, my pulse thundering in my ears. He grabbed his bag, gave me that same thin smile, and stepped out into the rain. For a moment, relief washed over me. But then, before closing the door, he leaned back in and said, "Drive safe. You never know who you'll meet out here." And then he was gone. I floored it, not daring to look back. To this day, I don't know if he was just a strange, unsettling man, or if I narrowly avoided becoming another missing person on that endless stretch of highway. When I first moved into my apartment, I thought I'd lucked out. The rent was cheap, the neighborhood was quiet, and my neighbor across the hall seemed friendly enough. He was older, maybe late 40s, always quick with a smile whenever we passed each other in the hallway. At first, I appreciated how polite he was. He'd hold the elevator door, ask about my day, even bring in packages left outside my door. It felt like the kind of neighbor everyone wishes they had. But over time, it started to feel like too much. One morning, I stepped out into the hall and found a cup of coffee waiting outside my door. No note, no explanation. Just sitting there, still warm. I didn't think much of it until it happened again. And again, always waiting when I opened my door in the morning. One evening, as I was unlocking my apartment. I heard his door crack open behind me. His voice was low, almost playful. "Did you like the coffee?" My stomach dropped. I never told him I was the one who kept finding it, and I sure as hell never thanked him. I laughed awkwardly, muttered a quick, "Yeah, thanks," and hurried inside. But from that night on, I started noticing other things. Every time I left my apartment, I'd hear his peephole creak open. Every time I came home, his door would be ajar just slightly, as if he'd been waiting. Once, when I came back late from work, I found a sticky note pressed to my door that said, "You work too hard. Get some rest." That was the moment I realized he was watching me. I installed a chain lock, double-checked the windows, tried to convince myself I was overthinking, until one night, I woke up at 3 a.m. to the sound of my doorknob turning. Slow, careful, testing the lock. I froze in bed, my breath caught in my throat, praying the lock would hold. After what felt like forever, the noise stopped. The next morning, I found another note. This one read, "Locks won't keep friends apart forever." I moved out the next week, and sometimes, late at night, I wonder if he's sitting across the hall from someone new, waiting for them to notice the coffee. I was traveling for work when I booked an Airbnb in a small town I'd never been to before. The listing looked nice, modern, clean, plenty of positive reviews. The host even offered to meet me at check-in, which I thought was a nice personal touch. When I arrived, the house looked just like the photos. The host, a tall man with an unervingly wide smile, greeted me at the door. He shook my hand a little too long, his eyes never leaving mine. "Make yourself at home," he said. "You're safe here." The way he emphasized that last part, it didn't sound reassuring. It sounded like a warning. At first, I brushed it off as awkward small talk. I set my bags down, checked the bedroom, and everything seemed fine. But later that night, as I was getting ready for bed, I noticed something odd. The vent above the bed wasn't blowing any air. In fact, it didn't even look like it was connected to the air system. It looked fake. I climbed onto the nightstand, shined my phone flashlight inside, and my stomach dropped. Behind the vent cover, there was a small camera lens pointing directly at the bed. My skin went cold. I packed my things immediately, but when I reached the front door, the deadbolt wouldn't turn. I tried again, harder this time, but it was jammed. That's when I heard footsteps upstairs. Slow, heavy, deliberate. The host was still in the house. Heart pounding. I rushed to the back, trying every window until finally one slid open. I shoved my bag through, crawled out, and sprinted into the street without looking back. I reported the listing to Airbnb the next morning, but when I checked again a few days later, it was still up. Same photos, same host, same house. And I couldn't stop wondering, how many people stayed there and never thought to check the vent? I've always loved the outdoors. Hiking, fresh air, the quiet of the woods. It was my escape from the chaos of everyday life. So one summer, I decided to take a solo camping trip. Just me, a tent, and a weekend away from everything. The first night was peaceful. I set up camp near a small clearing, built a fire, and fell asleep to the sound of crickets. But sometime in the middle of the night, I woke up not to crickets, not to wind, to footsteps. They were faint at first, circling the tent, crunching leaves, breaking twigs. I told myself it had to be an animal, maybe a deer, but then I heard breathing. Slow, heavy breathing. I froze, not daring to move, my hand gripping the flashlight beside me. Whoever or whatever it was, they stopped right outside my tent. The fabric bulged inward, as if someone was pressing a hand against it. I held my breath until the pressure disappeared. Minutes passed in silence, and finally, I heard the footsteps fade into the distance. I didn't sleep at all after that. The next morning, I unzipped the tent and stepped outside. My blood ran cold. In the dirt, all around my campsite, were footprints. Human footprints. They circled the tent again and again, stopping right at the entrance, but never leaving a trail out of clearing. I packed up and left that morning, cutting the trip short. On the hike back, I kept glancing behind me, certain I was being followed. And here's the part that still keeps me up at night. When I got home and unrolled my tent to clean it, I found something tucked inside the folds of the fabric. A small piece of paper. Scrawled in messy handwriting were 3 words. See you soon. And that's where we'll leave it for now. 10 stories. 10 moments that blur the line between coincidence and nightmare. But here's the thing. None of them ever really feel finished, do they? Every time I think back, I can't shake the feeling that some of these stories didn't end at all. They just paused, waiting. So now I'll ask you, which of these left you looking over your shoulder? Have you ever had an experience that felt too close to one of these? Drop your story in the comments, because the truth is, the scariest ones are always the ones that actually happen to you. If you made it this far, you're braver than most. Make sure you're subscribed, because the next set of stories might just make you sleep with the lights on. Until then, stay alert, stay safe, and remember, sometimes the real danger isn't in the story, it's in the silence afterward.